He tried to publicly humiliate her, a woman draped in midnight blue velvet, unaware she held the ledger that would dismantle his entire empire. The air in the ballroom of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, aged whiskey, and thinly veiled judgment. I was there because my boss, a minor but incredibly wealthy venture capitalist named Sterling Hawthorne, insisted on bringing his trophy date. That's me, I suppose, even if I was actually there to manage his extremely volatile social calendar. Sterling prided himself on being an arbiter of taste, which mostly meant he was just incredibly loud and dressed better than everyone else. Tonight, however, he seemed unusually agitated, his expensive silk tie pulled slightly too tight. We were positioned near the massive marble columns, a prime spot for observing the crème de la crème, or, as Sterling called them, the old money relics, who secretly feared anyone with new money. Then she walked in. The hush wasn't immediate. It built like a pressure wave. She wasn't wearing a tiara or a sash, not openly anyway. She was tall, impossibly elegant, draped in a gown the color of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the chandelier light rather than reflect it. Her skin was the deepest, richest mahogany I had ever seen in that predominantly pale-faced room, and her hair was styled in an intricate, architectural crown of braids woven with what looked like actual delicate gold wire. She moved with a stillness that commanded attention, a quiet authority that made the room's buzzing chatter stutter and die. Sterling, bless his perpetually arrogant soul, Abi leaned in conspiratorially, gripping my arm perhaps a little too hard. Look at that. Just look at her, Clara. Who is she? Some sort of exotic import for the emir's delegation. She's clearly used to being stared at, but honestly, the sheer audacity of that color palette in this sea of beige and taupe. I tried to pull away gently. Sterling, please. She's stunning. Let's just find the catering table. Nonsense. This is prime observation time, he hissed. His eyes narrowed in that proprietary way he had when sizing up something he thought he could categorize or dismiss. And frankly, she looks far too serious. Probably some overeducated drama queen who thinks that velvet makes her royalty. Watch this. Before I could physically restrain him, and trust me, I've had to restrain him from starting minor diplomatic incidents before, Sterling gave a performative cough, straightened his already impeccable tuxedo, and strode directly toward the woman who was now accepting a glass of champagne from a nervous waiter. The atmosphere tightened instantly. People were pretending not to watch, their heads angled just so, their champagne flutes held mid-air like weapons poised for impact. Sterling reached her, not with a polite introduction, but with a broad, condescending smile that didn't touch his eyes. He didn't offer a handshake. He offered a critique. "Excuse me, my dear," he boomed, just loud enough for the surrounding tables to catch the tail end of his opening salvo. "I must say, while your ensemble is certainly bold, one does wonder about the suitability of such heavy fabrics for a spring reception. It quite drowns out your natural features, doesn't it? One hopes you aren't compensating for something." The silence that followed was absolute. The woman hadn't flinched. Her expression, which had been one of polite neutrality, didn't change its geometry, but something shifted in her dark, intelligent eyes. A flicker, like dry ice hitting warm water. I felt a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. This was beyond his usual boundary pushing. This was a deliberate, public humiliation attempt, aimed at someone who clearly commanded respect, even if Sterling couldn't place her pedigree. The woman took a slow, deliberate sip of her champagne, setting the glass down on a passing waiter's tray with an almost inaudible click. Then, she turned her full attention to Sterling, her posture never wavering. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said. Her voice was low, resonant, and carried the precise, musical cadence of someone who had been taught elocution by the best in the world, yet it held an undercurrent of steel. The fact that she knew his name without him introducing himself was the first crack in Sterling's facade. Sterling blinked, thrown off his rehearsed follow-up insult. You know who I am?" "Ah, well, yes, naturally. I'm Sterling Hawthorne. And you are?" He preened slightly, expecting her to stammer out the name of some minor European countess. She tilted her head, a gesture so regal it felt like mockery. "You are correct, Mr. Hawthorne. You are Sterling Hawthorne, the gentleman whose recent investment in biotech has been wildly profitable, despite your frankly barbaric methods of acquisition." She paused, letting that sink in, a clear indication she had researched him thoroughly. "And as for who I am—" She reached up, and in a slow, almost agonizingly deliberate motion, she plucked one of the tiny, shimmering gold wires from her hair. It looked like an ancient artifact. She held it loosely between her thumb and forefinger, letting it catch the light. "You mistook my attire for an attempt to compensate, Mr. Hawthorne. You assumed I was merely trying to appear wealthy or significant in this rather drab collection of inherited mediocrity." Her eyes locked onto his, and I could practically hear Sterling's internal monologue shutting down. Let me clarify something for you, based on the level of access you clearly require to understand my standing." She lowered her voice again, and this time the sound cut through the room like shattered glass. "The fabric is not velvet. It is woven silk from the looms of the royal house of Alzara. And this," she gestured vaguely toward her entire being, "is not an attempt to compensate." She took one small step forward, closing the final inch of distance between them. Sterling actually took a reflexive step back, his bravado visibly melting away, replaced by a sickly pale sheen spreading across his forehead. "You see, Mr. Hawthorne," she continued, her voice rising just enough to ensure the whole immediate vicinity was frozen in anticipation, "I am not merely attending this gala as a guest, and I am here on official business concerning several pending trade agreements that your company, Hawthorne Global, is desperately trying to undermine through aggressive lobbying." Sterling finally found his voice, a choked, reedy sound. "Alzara? But the royal family doesn't send women to these preliminary meetings, and certainly not—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought that she was the wrong color, the wrong gender, the wrong everything for his limited worldview. She smiled then, a true, devastating smile that held zero warmth. It was the smile of a predator who has successfully cornered its prey. "Oh, they send me, Mr. Hawthorne. They send me because when the men are too busy admiring the quality of my jewelry, they fail to realize they are speaking directly to the Crown Regent herself." And then, she did the unthinkable. She reached behind her back, not for an escort or a bodyguard, but for a heavy, ornate case that had been resting unseen against the marble. With an almost casual display of strength, she flipped the twin silver latches. The sound echoed through the sudden, utter silence of the ballroom. Sterling Hawthorne, the man who had insulted heads of state and bankrupted competitors with a smirk, looked down into the open case, his face draining of every drop of color. His eyes went wide, fixed on the object nestled inside the black velvet lining. He didn't scream. He didn't faint. He just stood there, utterly paralyzed, staring at the unmistakable, cold, glittering symbol of absolute, inescapable authority. A symbol that meant his career, his fortune, and possibly much, much more, was about to be systematically dismantled. The regent looked from the object in the case to Sterling's terrified face, and her voice dropped to a near whisper, lethal in its intimacy. "Good evening, Regent Zara Al-Jamil, and welcome to the beginning of your audit, Mr. Hawthorne." The object in the case was not a scepter nor a crown, but something far more chilling to a man like Sterling. An antique, heavy, silver-plated ledger, bound in alligator skin, its pages brittle with age, and clearly labeled on the spine in florid gold script. Proprietary holdings. Hawthorne Global Assets and Undisclosed Liabilities, 1988 to present. Sterling Hawthorne looked as though he had just been shown a ghost wearing his own face. His jaw worked silently, unable to form a coherent sound. I, Clara, felt my own breath catch, a desperate sharp intake of air that scraped my throat. I had seen Sterling operate under pressure before, during market crashes, hostile takeovers, even a brief, unpleasant stint in federal court, but I had never witnessed this total, irreversible system failure. Regent Zara Al-Jamil, whose composure remained flawlessly intact, nudged the case slightly with the toe of her impossibly elegant shoe. "Don't worry, Mr. Hawthorne. It's surprisingly light, considering the sheer weight of the evidence it contains. We won't need to open it here, of course. This is a celebration, after all." The sarcasm was a physical blow. The crowd, which had been holding its collective breath, let out a collective, low murmur, a sound like sand shifting in the wind. Everyone present recognized the gravity of what had just been revealed. This wasn't a social faux pas. This was a declaration of war delivered at a diplomatic luncheon. I finally managed to break free from my shock and stepped forward, instinctively positioning myself between Sterling and the Regent. I had managed Sterling's life for 4 years. Protecting his interests, however toxic they were, was ingrained habit. "Regent Al-Jamil," I began, forcing my voice to remain level, attempting to sound like a concerned, albeit subordinate, professional. "I apologize for Mr. Hawthorne's frankly inexcusable behavior. He is under considerable stress due to the volatility of the Asian markets this quarter. Perhaps we could take this conversation offline. My name is Clara Vance, his chief of staff. I assure you, any misunderstandings regarding the biotech acquisitions can be rectified immediately through proper channels." The Regent's gaze swung toward me, sharp and assessing. She didn't dismiss me. She studied me, lingering just long enough for my professionalism to be weighed against Sterling's appalling public display. "Ms. Vance," she acknowledged coolly, "I am aware of your designation. You are the competent shield protecting the reckless arsonist. A difficult role." She gave a slight nod, a gesture of respect for my quick recovery perhaps, but then her attention snapped back to Sterling. "However, this is not a misunderstanding, Ms. Vance. This is leverage. And leverage is best applied where the subject can appreciate the full scope of the pressure." Sterling finally found his voice, though it was barely a croak. "Leverage? You can't possibly have proof of anything substantive. My auditors are the best in the world. That book, it's propaganda. Falsified documents." Regent Zara laughed, a clear, crystalline sound that held no humor. "Falsified? Mr. Hawthorne, the Alzara Treasury does not deal in rumor or conjecture. We deal in facts verified by centuries of unparalleled record-keeping. That ledger represents the paper trail of every illegal transfer, every bribed official, every artificially suppressed competitor, including the very patents you attempted to steal from the Singaporean University last spring." My blood ran cold again. I knew about the Singapore deal. It was Sterling's biggest gamble, a massive risk that had hinged on suppressing crucial regulatory filings. If the Regent had the receipts for that— "If you have that ledger here, in this hotel," I interjected quickly, trying to reclaim some control, "then you have demonstrated significant security breaches on your side as well, Regent. We can discuss immediate cease and desist orders based on espionage charges." It was a desperate bluff, but Sterling looked slightly steadier, hearing a possible counterattack. The Regent's smile widened, a genuine flash of predatory amusement this time. "Espionage? Oh, Miss Vance, you mistake preparation for infiltration. You see, when one deals with people like Mr. Hawthorne, one does not break in. One waits for them to invite you to the party." She leaned down conspiratorially toward Sterling, her voice dropping to a private murmur that somehow carried clearly across the now silent ballroom. "Do you remember, Sterling, receiving that lovely, bespoke invitation 3 months ago? The one promising an exclusive, early look at the newly discovered manganese deposits in the West African corridor? The one that offered full, unfettered access to the primary geological surveys?" Sterling's eyes widened further, and he visibly trembled, his breath hitching. He nodded once, sharply, involuntarily. "Yes, the anonymous invitation. It was too good to pass up." "Indeed," the Regent purred, gesturing toward the ledger. "That invitation was not anonymous, Sterling. It was a bait line. Every document, every survey, every supposedly secure file you accessed while you were so busy congratulating yourself on your brilliance was being copied, catalogued, and cross-referenced by my dedicated team of digital historians." She closed the ledger with a definitive snap, the sound echoing like a final gavel strike. Sterling made a small, pathetic noise in the back of his throat. He looked trapped, cornered, like a magnificent, aggressive beast suddenly finding itself in a cage made of diamonds, beautiful, inescapable, and instantly lethal. "I have everything," she stated simply, placing the ledger back into its case and snapping the lock shut with finality. She looked past Sterling, directly at me, her expression softening marginally, recognizing the sheer terror on my face, the terror of being suddenly implicated in my employer's downfall. "Ms. Vance," she said, her tone shifting from judge to facilitator, You have exactly 5 minutes to gather Mr. Hawthorne's immediate personal effects. Then, you and he will accompany my security detail to a private residence where we can discuss the terms of his voluntary, immediate divestiture of all assets related to the Alzara interests. I swallowed hard, realizing that 5 minutes was an impossible time frame, yet I couldn't argue. Not when the Regent looked capable of having us both escorted out in handcuffs, or worse, by dawn. As I turned towards Sterling, ready to usher him away like a collapsing skyscraper, a flicker of something ancient and desperate ignited in his eyes. It was the last wild spark of the venture capitalist's gambler instinct. He glanced wildly around the ballroom, his eyes catching on the nearest exit, the one leading to the service corridors, away from the main doors and the Regent's looming security detail. He didn't argue, didn't plead. Instead, Sterling Hawthorne performed the one move he knew best when cornered. He created chaos. With a sudden, surprising surge of adrenaline fueled by sheer terror, he shoved me hard into the marble column, knocking the air from my lungs, and bolted, not toward the service exit, but directly toward the main ballroom doors, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Fire! Everyone out! There's a bomb!" The effect of Sterling's primal shriek was instantaneous and catastrophic. The carefully constructed facade of polite society shattered. Crystal began to clatter as hands flew to steady champagne flutes, then dropped them entirely. A collective gasp morphed into a panicked surge as hundreds of the city's elite, terrified by the word "bomb" echoing in the enclosed space, scrambled toward the exits. The elegant ballet dissolved into a chaotic and a self-preserving stampede. Regent Zara Al-Jamil did not flinch. She didn't even raise her voice above its controlled, regal pitch. She merely watched Sterling Hawthorne, the arrogant, newly minted millionaire, trip over his own feet in his desperate flight, disappearing into the swirling mass of silk, tuxedos, and sheer terror near the main entrance. "Predictable," she murmured, shaking her head slightly, a gesture of profound disappointment rather than surprise. She turned her attention back to me, pinned against the cold marble, still gasping for breath. "Ms. Vance," the Regent stated, her voice cutting through the rising din with unnatural clarity, "you are now complicit in obstructing a lawful detainment. Though I suspect you are acting under duress. Remain calm. Do not follow him." My own sense of self-preservation was battling furiously with the need to keep my job, or, more accurately, to avoid being left stranded when Sterling's entire empire imploded. "He's just created a riot, Your Highness. If he gets out, he'll disappear into the international wires before morning. You need to secure him now." The Regent gave a curt nod toward the entrance, where two men, impeccably dressed, broad-shouldered, and utterly devoid of any warmth, had detached themselves from the wall near the columns. They were not merely security. They looked like highly specialized removal experts. "They are not pursuing him through the main doors," the Regent informed me coolly. "He will run into the kitchen access, thinking the service staff will hide him. He underestimates the reach of the Alzara network in this city. My associates are already sealing the back exits." She gestured toward the case, still resting serenely on the floor beside her. "You, Ms. Vance, have a choice. You can join the stampede, attempting to catch your volatile employer, and perhaps earn yourself a temporary reprieve from his inevitable collapse, which, I assure you, will happen within the hour. Or you can stay here, demonstrate integrity under duress, and accept my protection while we secure him." The choice felt less like an option, and more like a final, irrevocable contract being signed. If Sterling escaped, he would burn everything down on his way out, and I would be the one left holding the ashes and facing regulatory inquests. If I stayed, I allied myself, however temporarily, with the power that was currently dismantling him. "I stay," I managed, pushing myself upright, dusting off my dress automatically. "I need to ensure that his non-compromised assets, the legitimate ones, are secured from seizure while this investigation proceeds." Regent Zara's lips curved into the faintest approximation of approval. "Pragmatic. Good. My team will handle the physical retrieval. Your immediate concern should be the digital footprint." She signaled to one of the imposing men, who promptly stepped forward, not to apprehend me, but to hand me a sleek, unmarked satellite phone. "Use this," she instructed. "Call your head of IT. Instruct him to immediately lock down every server, halt all outgoing transfers, and activate Protocol Nightingale, the emergency data quarantine we discussed in the preliminary trade documents you signed last year. I stared at the phone, then back at her. Protocol Nightingale? I never saw... Of course you didn't, she interrupted gently. Mr. Hawthorne believes only he gets to read the fine print of his own destruction. That protocol was designed to freeze any account that appeared to be moving funds based on fraudulent proprietary knowledge. It's active now. You have 30 minutes before the system begins flagging every single transaction Sterling has made in the last fiscal quarter as potentially compromised. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Sterling hadn't just hired me to manage his schedule. He had hired me to sign the documents that sealed his fate should he cross the wrong people. He'd used me as a disposable signature, never realizing the documents themselves contained the tools for his undoing, handed to him by his supposed trade partners. The Regent checked her thin, antique gold wristwatch. 28 minutes, Miss Vance. Your next move will determine whether you are an accessory or a critical witness. Suddenly, a new, sharp sound cut through the remaining chaos. Not a scream, but the high, piercing shriek of a smoke detector, instantly followed by the distinctive, heavy thud, thud, thud of fire suppression foam beginning to deploy near the ceiling vents. The Regent stiffened, her composure momentarily broken. She looked up, scanning the ceiling panels with sudden urgency. "What is this?" This was not scheduled. One of the security men moved swiftly, drawing a compact matte black device from his inside jacket pocket. Not a firearm, but a directional scanner. He swept it across the room, his brow furrowed. "Regent," the guard said, his voice low and urgent, "we have secondary thermal signatures deployed. Not foam. Halon gas, pressurized dispersal. It's designed to eliminate electronics and organic matter simultaneously in a confined space." Someone anticipated the detention. The Regent's eyes snapped to the massive double doors through which Sterling had fled. He didn't just run, he bought himself an exit strategy. He set a timed trap. The heavy, chemical scent of Halon began to seep into the air, replacing the perfume and whiskey. It was cold, suffocating, and terrifyingly effective. "Ms. Vance," the Regent snapped, grabbing the ledger case in one decisive motion. "Forget the IT lockdown. Forget the divestiture. We have approximately 60 seconds before the oxygen levels drop dangerously low in this entire wing. Move." She spun on her heel and marched toward the smaller, private security door hidden behind a tapestry on the far side of the ballroom. A door I didn't even know existed. As I scrambled to follow her, dodging panicked guests still trying to use the main exit, the Halon gas system kicked into full, terrifying capacity. Visibility dropped instantly. I could see the Regent's silhouette just ahead of me, illuminated by the emergency exit signs flickering madly in the rapidly clearing air. I lunged for the tapestry, throwing it aside just as the heavy, eeky metallic click of the security door locking from the outside echoed ominously through the dense, chemical fog. The Regent pounded on the heavy wood, her regal calm finally breaking into genuine fury. "They sealed us in. Find out who ordered the deployment," she commanded, turning back to us, her face tight with realization. Sterling Hawthorne may have fled, but he was not the one who prepared this secondary defense. Someone higher up anticipated our move. Just then, a small, insistent red light began to blink rapidly on the security panel next to the locked door, accompanied by a synthesized, calm, female voice that cut through the hiss of the Halon. "Containment breach identified. Initiating thermal purge sequence in T-1 minute. Enjoy your final moments, Regent." The synthesized voice was chillingly detached, its gentle cadence utterly at odds with the threat it delivered. Thermal purge. In this enclosed space, saturated with halon gas, a thermal purge meant incineration. Regent Zara Al-Jamil didn't waste a single breath on panic. The flicker of fear I'd seen moments before vanished, replaced by a fierce, absolute clarity. She didn't waste time on the now useless security panel. She slammed the heavy ledger case against the door twice, a purely symbolic act of defiance against the trap sprung by her adversaries. "The service exit," she roared, shoving me toward the far corner of the ballroom where the kitchens opened. "The maintenance shafts. They'll never account for a direct vertical breach." The security guards, clearly veterans of far more dangerous scenarios than a socialite panic, were already moving. One of them, the one who had handed me the satellite phone, was already sprinting toward the edge of the kitchen entrance, using the last vestiges of visibility to identify the nearest access point. The air was growing noticeably warmer, a dry, unnatural heat that preceded the flames. I could feel the beginnings of a burning sensation in my lungs, despite the Halen's initial purpose of oxygen depletion, not combustion. Sterling hadn't just run. He had traded himself for a time bomb, ensuring that anyone who could detain him would be eliminated alongside him. "Clara," the Regent barked, using my name without the formal prefix for the first time. "Your phone. Call your IT contact. Tell him to execute Protocol Nightingale now, regardless of the state of the servers. Use the satellite link for priority routing." I fumbled for the phone, my fingers clumsy with cold terror and rising adrenaline. I managed to punch in the emergency preset number for my head of IT, Mark. "Mark, it's Clara. Execute Nightingale. Full lockdown. Immediate global flag on all Hawthorne assets. Tell him the Regent ordered it. Do you understand?" The Regent. Through the static of the failing cellular connection, Mark's voice, usually monotone, cracked with alarm. "Ms. Vance, what the hell is going on? The system is reporting massive intrusion attempts from 3 different sovereign networks, and an active trace on your personal devices." "Just do it, Mark," I yelled, shutting the phone off before the compromised network could trace our location. As if on cue, the Regent spotted an access panel near the grand piano, usually reserved for sound technicians. She kicked the thin metal panel with surprising force, bending the frame enough for the security guard to wedge his multi-tool into the gap. "Ms. Vance, your employer's primary defense strategy was financial evasion," the Regent said, her voice tight, as the guard wrenched the panel open, revealing a dark, narrow crawl space leading down. "Mine is diplomacy backed by demonstrable, unchallengeable truth. If Sterling has triggered a firewall, we must ensure the truth, the ledger, survives the purge." She looked at me, her dark eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to cut through the smoke thickening around us. "Take the case. Go down first. Keep it safe." She thrust the heavy ledger case into my arms. It was shockingly heavy, a concrete reminder of the colossal weight of corruption contained within. "But what about you?" I asked, hesitating at the black maw of the shaft. "I am the Crown," she stated simply. "The Crown always survives the court intrigue." The temperature spiked dramatically. A low, ominous roar filled the ballroom as the thermal purge ignited, and the air around the grand chandeliers began to warp. The security guard didn't wait. He grabbed me by the arm and propelled me unceremoniously down the shaft, the heavy case banging against my ribs. We tumbled several feet onto a grating below, landing in the relative safety of the hotel's rarely used ventilation service tunnels. Above us, the roar intensified. Then a sound that was impossible, the sound of reinforced steel buckling under extreme, rapid heat. The trap Sterling had bought had been far more powerful than anyone anticipated. Oh, the guard immediately pulled a small thermal visor over his eyes and pointed a flashlight down the narrow tunnel. "Regent, now!" We waited, peering up into the dark opening. For a terrifying 10 seconds, there was only the sound of the fire raging above and the metallic groaning. Then a figure dropped silently onto the grating beside us. Regent Zara Al-Jamil. She hadn't used the guard's helping hand. She had simply dropped, landing as lightly as a falling leaf, her midnight blue gown slightly singed at the hem, but otherwise pristine. "That was close," she breathed, her composure returning instantly. She took the case back from me, securing it against her body. Sterling may have won the race to the door, but he lost the war for the narrative. By the time the local authorities extinguish that blaze, the world will be reading the initial findings Mark's team has already uploaded, thanks to your timely call, Ms. Vance. She looked at the 2 men, then at me, a small victorious smile touching her lips. Sterling Hawthorne thought he could hide his crimes in plain sight among his peers. He underestimated the power of quiet preparation. We moved quickly through the labyrinthine darkness of the service tunnels, the sounds of distant sirens and confused emergency crews growing louder. "The ledger stays with me," the Regent confirmed, pausing at a heavy steel door leading out to a nondescript loading dock 3 blocks from the hotel. "As for you, Ms. Vance, You showed more nerve in the last 10 minutes than Sterling Hawthorne has shown in his entire career. You saved the evidence that will dismantle his entire network. You have just rendered yourself invaluable." She nodded to her guards. "Escort Miss Vance to a secure location. Provide her with temporary documentation and contact information. She is under official protection until the dust settles. She will be needed for testimony." As I was being ushered toward a waiting, unmarked black sedan, I turned back for one last look at the Regent. She stood framed in the opening of the loading dock, radiating authority against the chaos erupting behind her. "And the Regent?" I asked, a sense of profound, unsettling finality washing over me. "What happens to her?" Regent Zara Al-Jamil straightened her damaged gown, the midnight blue velvet seeming suddenly heavier, darker. She met my gaze one last time, a look of deep, satisfied power settling over her features. "I return home," she said, anchor turning her back on the burning hotel and the city's suddenly shattered elite. "And I begin the tedious process of rebuilding the trade agreements Sterling tried to destroy. The only thing a true ruler needs after an insult is not revenge, Miss Vance. It is compliance. And Sterling Hawthorne, wherever he is hiding, will soon find that true compliance costs far more than he ever stole."